Welcome to the crypto trading channel. My name is Stu. Well, guys, after yesterday's stream, we ended up dropping to the start of my 4-hour support zone and got a reaction right at the 786 I pointed out at about 62.5K. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to see a bit of a reaction, but I still think it's way too early to suggest there's any sort of confirmation that the bottom is in. I think it's very likely we push a little higher, but the bulls have some serious work to do for me to consider this trend bullish whatsoever. So as I mentioned at yesterday's live stream, basically, I mean, actually, even before that, I've been talking about this potential setup for, well, more so the potential support for a couple of weeks now. Basically, even when we were trading back up in this general area here on, let's say, the 14th, 15th of February, so over a week ago, I was talking about the very realistic possibility that we come down and test this support. And that isn't anything too crazy. That is just market structure doing market structure things. That's just after finding some support, doing some sort of a retest of that support. Now, the one reason why I still have very large concerns about this is with this support retest, we never did end up breaking any sort of 4-hour trend, right? I've been talking about this for a while now, that the lower high I'm considering here is right around 77K. We actually got stopped. Well, I shouldn't say get stopped. We never got stopped on a position on that. But just the price got halted. The price got stopped dead in its tracks, about 5,000 US dollars shy of being able to even consider breaking that lower high on the micro trend on the 4-hour. So I still have very large concerns. Not to say that this support doesn't mean anything. It's just that I would give a lot more weight to this support if we would have went a little higher, right? If the market structure would have ended up going and breaking that lower high and then coming back down and testing this support, I would have been very bullish on this level, even if it was just for a midterm bounce, whatever. At least at that point, we would have had a confirmed actual STUBER fib long setup, right, for a bullish perspective. But right now, I mean, yeah, it's still technically potentially support. It just doesn't have the confluence of that broken structure lining up with it as well. And obviously, I mean, if we do get some sort of a bounce, because realistically, I mean, we aren't even very well, we're about halfway to the 0.5 fib target at this point. And obviously, even possible we end up going to the 214 fib, which would actually be around 69.6K. The 0.5 fib, so the first target would be around 66K. So I think it's still very possible that we do see a bigger bounce. But honestly, we'll have to see, because looking at the micro trend, just from where we actually got our bearish pivot here, you can see just looking at this current downtrend, we got this little low here because we got a little bounce and we set a lower low. So on the micro trend, the very micro trend on the 4-hour here, we technically have not even broke that yet. So once again, just kind of having a little bit of concerns with that, because the market structure still not doing any favors for the bulls at this point. But like I said, I mean, I'd rather be a buyer at support rather than a seller. I mean, I'm not, or at least I wasn't interested in YOLOing into short positions into support like a lot of people were doing, because a lot of people get bearish at support, just like they get FOMO at resistance. In fact, I mentioned in the Telegram channel, you guys, that I was closing the short position that I took yesterday. Basically, I ended up taking a bunch more profits at the 786 there, because it is a buy level, whether or not I wanted to take a long position, which I never at that time. But it was still a buy level. So being I was in a short, I took a buy, which ended up taking some profits off of my short, right? So yeah, I mean, I mentioned that. And then as we got a nice little reaction off that level, that's where I ended up closing the rest of that short. But guys, for those of you who are interested in seeing way more examples of how I'm just looking at market structure in general, some of my trade setups, some of my strategies, warnings, and so on, be sure to scan the QR code to gain access to my private Telegram, which also grants you free unlimited algo bot trading as well, due to our exclusive partnership with Prime Automation. So if you are into bot trading and you want to give that a try, you know what to do. But yeah, also on top of the automated trading, obviously I am sharing my insights on the market, much like this. Both of these trade setups that I laid out on the last two very aggressive dumps, I mean, I mapped out the resistance levels and we got absolutely nuked from those levels. So love to see it. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see Bitcoin go parabolic just like the next guy. But as far as where these rejections are happening, it's actually very, very easy to spot these levels, in my opinion. Like the market structure isn't doing anything crazy. It's just that when we retest resistance after setting bearish structure, yeah, the resistance ends up kicking into gear and we see those harsh corrections. So far, so good. Nothing out of the ordinary happening, in my opinion. Even as far as the 4-year cycle, everything is still on schedule. I would still expect us to see lower prices. The most bullish thing Bitcoin could do for me right now would be absolutely nuke to 40K, rip that Band-Aid off, get it over with, hit those targets that I've been calling for since October. Obviously doesn't have to happen, but it's just still very possible at this time, right? Even on the weekly, if we do get a strong bounce, notice that we have, when we really zoom out and look at the macro here, you guys, I mean, a lot of people are willing to celebrate after a couple of hours of bullish price action, basically. But when we really zoom out and look at what's going on here, just looking at the market structure for what it is, on the weekly, we actually have a confirmed lower high sitting at 98K right now. So we could get a very aggressive bounce and still be in a very bearish trend. So at this point, I either want to see a lower high taken out. It would actually be a lot nicer if the price would do something like that, where we got a much nicer, tighter level that we could break, something like that, and then start longing some retests on support rather than the opposite that we've been doing for the last 4 or 5 months here. But we'll have to see. Right. I still think that it's very possible we end up hitting the STUBER fib on the weekly time frame, which would be around 40K. But obviously, we're going to have to see what happens. It's not like I've sold all of my spot and I'm not willing to buy a thing until those levels. It's not like I'm holding a YOLO short for those. Although, actually, I shouldn't really say that. I do still have a part of my short from 89.9K running, and I would end up closing it if we end up hitting that 40K level. But obviously I mean, we'll see what happens. It's not like I'm holding the whole position. I've been paying myself along the way. And yeah, even with some of those shorting profits over the last 4 or 5 months, I have been DCAing into spot positions because let's face it, I mean, the market's been basically cut in half. I'm expecting it to go lower, but I have no problem starting to DCA into these levels for the next, well, if it has to be another year or two until the next serious bull trend starts, then so be it. But I'm more than happy to accumulate spot. But as far as trading goes, I still think the trend is extremely bearish at this point. Just looking at the structure for what it is. On the 5 minute, I mean, you can really see how well we got that reaction, like I said, off that purple support box that I had mapped out. So this would be my 786 right at that 62.5K level. Notice we really only dropped about another $100, not even, to 62,420 approximately. And since then, getting that nice little reaction. So it is even possible. I would not be too surprised to see this end up rolling over and coming back down and retesting these levels. To be honest, I have mixed feelings about that. You know, as far as this trend goes, yeah, we broke some structure, right? We broke this range high. So at this point, if we end up pulling back, it's very possible we find some sort of a support retest of this 5 minute trend and end up retesting support, some sort of a smaller STUBER fib setup like that. Absolutely possible. The thing is, I'm still holding on to a very bearish bias, and I'm still favoring the short side of trading. I'll still take the odd scalp long, but I have by no means have any FOMO for the long side. I do not think we're about to go parabolic. I do not think we're about to moon to all-time highs. I don't think any of that is going to happen anytime soon. Happy to be wrong about it. I still have a lot of investments in crypto, and I would love to see that. I just really don't expect that. And looking at things for what they are and trading the charts for what they are and being realistic about what's happening in the market, I still just have to hold on to my bearish bias until there's at least some sort of a structure break on the 4 hour, right? Like I said, absolutely nothing has been broken on the 4 hour yet in several months. I really see no reason why I should get FOMO at a time like this. The trend is your friend until the end. Eventually, if we break a lower high, fantastic. At that point, I can start getting bullish again. But until that happens, I just have to remain cautious and bearish. The 5-minute, we are still currently holding on to the higher low structure. I've been kind of chasing the price with this structure, confirmed structure, ever since actually back here. I was keeping my VIPs in the Telegram up to date that basically after we started setting some higher highs, right? We had this high and this higher high, and I had mentioned that this is now a confirmed higher low on the trend. And then obviously we ended up going higher. That confirmed this as our higher low. We set a higher high, confirmed a very slightly higher low, basically the same though. But since then, we've now set another higher high, being we have this confirmed higher low on the trend. Now, that higher low we have actually broken with a wick already, right? We did wick below it, so that's a bit of a warning. But if we actually pull up our fibs from that bullish pivot there, we obviously didn't even come close to invalidating that STUBER setup by breaking below the 115. So far, this uptrend on the 5-minute, as far as I'm concerned, is still very much intact. I actually did take a bit of a long, I forget, actually, let me check where my position is from. I know it was based off of one of these micro higher lows on the trend, and it is sitting at 63,721. Let me just throw it on there. So basically just sitting, well, I almost got stopped at break even on the rest of my position, apparently. But yeah, this was just basically a typical STUBER fib, right? The fact that we had this higher high, I had a fib pulled like this, just for a scalp type of a setup, and obviously hit my first 2 scalp targets relatively quickly, actually extremely quickly. And from there, just having a break even stop. So we'll see what happens with the rest. If that turns into a nice juicy swing long position, then so be it. But really at this point, I wanted to remove my risk as quick as possible after taking some profits like that, and just, you know, taking it for what it is, because I still think that there is potential for much lower prices for all those reasons that I was outlining earlier. Taking a look at some other coins, let's take a look at Ethereum. You can see that we actually tested a little bit deeper into that STUBER pocket, but very similar price action, right? Same thing. We never did take out this confirmed lower high on the trend. For Ethereum on the 4-hour, same structure. We had this low where we got our little bounce, and then this was our next low where we got our next bounce. So this is my confirmed lower high on the trend at approximately 2193. You know what? Just call it 2195 to make it nice and even. But yeah, basically the exact same structure. Solana, very much the same, except Solana actually never did test all the way down to the STUBER fibs yet. Still the same bearish structure, right? This white line up here, I'll just make it red to keep it the same, but very much the same, right? No matter how you look at it, we just have not broke that lower high structure. And with Solana, you can actually see a very, very nice clean bearish one. In fact, actually a couple, right? We've tested the STUBER fib a couple of times now. They've played out to the first target, haven't hit that second target yet, but it is what it is. Just basically seeing the same type of market structure across so many different assets in crypto right now. And that's very typical, right? Generally speaking, altcoins are kind of moving the same as Bitcoin, except a little more volatile. So as Bitcoin ends up finding support, then you generally see altcoins moving even more aggressively than Bitcoin, much like when Bitcoin ends up facing resistance, then you see altcoins getting hammered extra hard compared. So that's just due to lower trade volume, lower market caps, just takes less money to move the price in general. But generally, they do tend to move together, basically. And guys, for those of you guys who do appreciate just looking at the charts for what they are, keeping a level head and trading charts rather than hopium and FOMO and tweets and all that sort of stuff, you guys, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And let me know in the chat how you guys are all feeling about the market. Are you guys feeling really bullish with this little bounce? Do you think it's going to be short-lived and we are still carrying on this bear market that we're in? How do you guys all feel about what's going on currently? Aloha, everyone. Nice little move up this morning after the pullback. Absolutely. And once again, the best part about that is that it was, again, just predictable levels, right? Just using Fibonacci's to avoid FOMO and waiting for those proper pullbacks. So, yeah, it's great to see these signs of life today. It's nice to see that, it's not like there's no bulls around at all and that the price is just cutting through support levels like a hot knife through butter. It's nothing like that. We're at least seeing these bounces off obvious bounce levels. It's just that we're also seeing those rejections around obvious rejection levels, right? Much like this one, the most recent short that I took last night. Very similar. Well, or actually, wait. Yeah, I think this was the one that I mentioned in my stream yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, just typical STUBER fib setups, doing STUBER fib things, right? Basically breaking structure to the downside. And when we get up to retest resistance, that's where we need to respect resistance, because resistance is resistance until it's broken. And if you have already broken support, then I am going to take the retest of resistance quite seriously. And that's the whole idea around these STUBER fib setups, right? It's to avoid FOMO rather than FOMOing into breakout positions and then getting wrecked on large positions. Instead, more so waiting for those retracements so your invalidations can be significantly tighter and at least keep your losses when they do happen. Because as traders, no trader is going to win every trade. There is way more to trading than just winning trades. It's also about managing risk and controlling losses as they come and keeping a level head when those losses happen, right? Very tricky when it comes to the game of trading. So, if I'm looking at altcoins, would I look at Aster? I can absolutely look at Aster. Also Troll getting a nice little bounce off the STUBER pocket. Yeah, let's take a look at Aster here quick. What do we have going on with Aster so far? On the 5-minute, the first thing catching my eye is the fact that we had this high, higher low. We obviously broke that. That means, oh geez, one too many times there. So yeah, as I was saying, with this break in structure here, we have a confirmed bearish pivot right there. So that means that I could pull a bearish fib, something like this. Notice we've actually got very close to the 786. It's possible that it got front run because it technically already hit the 0.5 fib target. But it's also possible we just end up testing a little bit higher yet. But that is just the immediate 5-minute trend. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's check out the hourly. Did we get, I don't think that was quite a bullish STUBER, but it would have been very close. Yeah, very close to a 786 test. But I was just thinking, since we ended up breaking this little bit of structure here, that it's very possible we end up coming down and testing this level. But it looks like it either got front run or it's going to happen yet. But since it has already tested the 0.5 and the 214 fib, it's very possible that bounce has already played out. Let's take a look. Let's zoom out a little further to the 4-hour. Now, there's a couple things catching my eye on the 4-hour currently. I'm going to lay out a few different scenarios here. One would be, obviously, we ended up taking out this level. So here, even though they're just wicks, we did have this high. We had a slightly higher high. This would be the lowest point between the two. If I put my line there, notice we ended up breaking that support. So at this time, it's very possible we are going to start a bit of a downtrend here as well. Happy to be wrong about that. Would love to see this invalidated. But at this time, basically, since we lost that structure, I would have been looking for a fib pull from our highest point, basically confirming our bearish pivot point here. Notice we never did get that 786 fib retest. But now, just kind of how the price has been acting, I would just continue chasing the price, right? So far, this is our low. So that would be my bearish fib pull if we end up climbing all the way up to this STUBER fib pocket, which is just below 75 cents, basically. It's actually about 74.8 cents. I have a couple of concerns with this exact setup. One, I mean, yeah, if we get up to these levels, you know what? Yeah, it's absolutely potential resistance basically as we approach those levels. However, technically, there is more of a current downtrend running because the fact that we had this low and we've set a lower low there, which means we have a new confirmed lower high on the trend. So in a case like this, I could also pull my fib from down here, and we may actually get an early rejection from the fib pull that I just had. The problem that I have with a setup like this is if you were to take the closer trade because you have FOMO, you want to get into it quicker, you want to keep a nice tight stop loss, so you're going to bump up your stop loss kind of up above the 115 there. The fact that this fib also hasn't been tested yet means that our resistance levels are kind of overlapping a little bit. So if you played that smaller fib pull and you started shorting that resistance and then you get stopped out, you're actually already into another short setup. So you may end up actually taking a couple losses if you tried to play it that way. Often what I'll do when I have two setups like this, which are very close to overlapping, I will bump my leverage down a little bit just to manage my risk a little bit. But then I will basically start entering or enter my smallest part of my position based on the smaller range, just with my first entry, and then kind of look to ladder into my position, something like this basically. So kind of playing both ranges at the same time. That's just because, like I said, if you end up getting stopped and invalidated on that first little guy, you're already right into the next one. So just a little bit of added risk there, I suppose, and something I wanted to mention there. If we end up just rolling over and dumping to the downside, at least we have broke a bunch of structure on the 4 hour, right? The fact that even here, for example, we have a low, lower low, confirmed lower high. We obviously broke that, even flipped that resistance into support, but it's still possible we get the retest, much like what I was talking about with other coins like Bitcoin, for example. So it's still very possible that we end up dumping down and getting a retest of support. And honestly, on something like this, that's a very large range. It's very volatile. The start of support on something like that is still 30% to the downside. Basically to the invalidation, that's getting cut in half. So it's absolutely a huge range. It's very volatile. But if we end up dropping down to these 4 hour support levels, that's where I would basically start looking at the lower time frames, looking for bullish STUBERs on the 5 minute, for example, while we're inside the 4 hour support zones, just looking for overlapping confluences on different time frames, just to kind of keep that risk under control, because that range is just so massive. If you ended up laddering into my typical ladder position, your average entry would be somewhere in here. And at that point, your invalidation is still about 20% away. So yeah, it's just risky when things get this volatile and ranges this big. So that's where, like I said, I would just like to see a lower time frame confirmation inside the larger time frame, basically. So that's what I'm seeing for Aster. Let's see, does the chart prime indicator here, the 3D trend indicator, it has recently flipped bearish. So we have potential resistance there, worth mentioning there. What about some other indicators? Let's take a look at the money flow point of control. You can see it is literally right above us right now. So that could also give us a little bit of trouble, some extra resistance there. I have a feeling this one, the Oracle Pro Plus, will probably still be bullish. Yeah, this guy's still bullish, and we actually have support right where we are. So we're seeing a little bit of mixed signals, but we're going to have to see what happens. But honestly, this doesn't look too bad to me. The fact that this guy did get a bullish cross. See the lower band crossing over the bigger band. We see it flipping green here. It is starting to change colors a little bit, so there's a little bit of concern there. But yeah, either way, I would want to see some sort of a bounce into a Fibonacci pocket or something like that if I was looking to short this guy. The Stu Fibs actually is a system for is it Wyckoff accumulations and distribution pattern. I see it as so. Please confirm. It's very possible they play out the same. It's just an exact trade strategy. I couldn't tell you if it's exact because I haven't really back tested different versions of the Wyckoff accumulation distribution zones. So I couldn't tell you for sure. But yeah, they will often look very similar, I'm sure. It totally depends how they range, because Stuber fibs come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. They do not need to look the same at all from one another. So, but yeah, it's very possible that they do sometimes. Bearish, but expecting an infamous pump at some point. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel, honestly. I think we're going to go significantly lower. I'm happy to be wrong about that, but I still really have my my feelings that we're going to eventually test 40K. But you have to consider that that's on a weekly chart, and that by no means has to happen in the next week or two. I mean, the way I had it mapped out originally, it would actually line up with October. It seems like we are playing out faster than previous cycles, but it hasn't completed yet. So I don't know for sure. But I would love to see Bitcoin at about 40K at the start of October, because that would line up from a timing perspective and a structure perspective. I would be a heavy buyer in that case. Zcash. I have mixed feelings about this one. I don't like where it is. And my reason for that, it's not that it can't be in support. It just never went as deep in that correction as I would have liked to see, because I would have liked to see us end up dropping to at least the 786, like the other ones that I was looking at. But yeah, I mean, obviously at this point we had our confirmed bullish pivot because we broke a bunch of structure here. So we do have that bullish fib pull. We have a bullish range here technically, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see it dump a little further. I haven't been trading this one myself recently. I haven't been following it too closely, but nothing's really jumping out at me right here real quickly, other than the fact that I think we should have tested a little bit lower into support. I would have felt a little better, because at that point, then you can have a tighter invalidation on the setup, basically. So either you're right and it is showing a lot of strength by bouncing early, or the move just hasn't finished playing out yet. That could go one of two different ways, basically. Anyways, guys, I think that's about all I really wanted to go over today. So one last time, if you did appreciate this live stream and you appreciate these market updates, please do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And just as a reminder, for those of you interested in joining my private Telegram channel, as well as wanting free access to unlimited algo bot trading through Prime Automation, be sure to scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the description down below. And of course, if these chart prime indicators also interest you, use our sign up link and discount code below to receive a 35% discount with that as well. And with that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends. Thank you so much for watching once again. Peace out.